A desperate farmer wins a teenage girl in a reckless poker game, never imagining the weight of what he's claimed. Her stepfather, Victor Clayton, used her life as a bet, a move so callous it shook their small town to its core. But Garrett Harper wasn't the kind of man to stand by while injustice rotted everything around him. And what happened next turned their lives upside down, leading to a finale where justice struck back in the most unexpected way. The night was unusually silent for the outskirts of a small Texas town. Dust rolled across the empty road as neon lights flickered outside a rundown bar where tired men nursed their failures at the bottom of cheap whiskey glasses. Garrett Harper, a farmer whose land had long since turned to dust, sat alone at a corner table. His face was weathered not just by the sun, but by years of disappointment that etched lines deeper than any plow ever could. They called him the Infertile Farmer behind his back, a cruel label whispered by those who didn't know the whole story. His wife had left 2 years ago after learning they could never have children. His crops failed season after season. His savings dwindled, and now even his neighbors avoided his gaze as though his bad luck was contagious. But that night wasn't about the farm or the whispers. That night was about the game. Victor Clayton leaned back in his chair across the table, his presence commanding in the dim light. A wealthy businessman with a reputation that sent shivers through town gossip, Victor smirked like a man who believed he could never lose. The two men had been locked in a tense poker match for hours, each hand raising the stakes higher. Around them, the room hummed with quiet anticipation. Onlookers held their breath as chips clinked and cards turned. Garrett's heart pounded, not from greed, but from desperation. The prize money wasn't just money, it was survival. It was seed for planting, repairs for the barn, food for the coming winter. Victor's voice sliced through the tension, low and mocking. "Tell you what, Harper, let's make this interesting. If you win, I'll throw in something special." Garrett frowned. "What are you talking about?" Victor snapped his fingers. From the shadowy doorway appeared a girl, 17 at most, with tangled chestnut hair and eyes wide with confusion. Her clothes were plain, oversized, as if to make her smaller, invisible. She stood stiffly, clutching the strap of her worn backpack. "This is June," Victor said lazily. "My stepdaughter. If I lose, she's yours to deal with. She's been nothing but trouble for me anyway." A chill ran through Garrett. The table went dead silent. Even the bartender froze mid-pour. This wasn't just reckless. It was monstrous. "You can't be serious," Garrett said, his voice low. Victor's grin widened. "I've never been more serious. Are you folding or playing?" Garrett's hands trembled. His instinct screamed to walk away, to leave and let the darkness of this man's world swallow itself whole. But June's eyes, there was something in them, a plea, fear, resignation. It was hard to tell, but it rooted Garrett in his chair. He played. The cards fell like guillotine blades, one after another, and when the dust settled, Garrett's hand was stronger. He'd won. But victory felt hollow. Victor leaned forward, an edge of amusement still in his expression. "She's all yours now, farmer. Good luck. You'll need it." June flinched as Victor shoved her forward, her small frame almost stumbling toward Garrett. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stood there, stiff and unyielding, like a cornered animal waiting for the next blow. Garrett couldn't move. The bar felt suffocating, the stares of the other patrons like weights pressing into his skin. He hadn't saved her. He'd only changed the cage. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet anger began to smolder. Not at June, not at himself, but at Victor Clayton, the man who treated lives as if they were chips on a table. The road back to Garrett's farm stretched like an endless shadow beneath the truck's headlights. June sat rigid in the passenger seat, her eyes fixed straight ahead, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Garrett's grip on the wheel was tight, his thoughts circling like vultures. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. The farmhouse loomed small and lonely against the wide-open fields. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Garrett led her to the guest room, its plain walls and single bed, offering no comfort. "You can stay here," he said quietly. June didn't respond. She set down her bag, her movements careful, measured, like someone in a stranger's home. In the days that followed, silence became their routine. June rarely left her room, and when she did, her steps were soft and guarded. She barely touched her meals and avoided Garrett's eyes. When he asked if she needed anything, her voice was sharp and cold. "I don't, and I'm not your responsibility." Garrett didn't argue. He couldn't. Deep down, he feared she was right. The farm echoed their distance. Fields lay barren, the soil cracked and dry. Garrett worked outside alone, but every so often he glimpsed her at the window, watching like a ghost, tethered to a place she didn't choose. In town, whispers followed him. People stared. Mothers pulled their children closer. One morning, a message was scrawled on his barn door, accusing, cruel. He scrubbed it away before June could see. But she knew. One evening, she finally broke the heavy silence at the kitchen table. "Do you enjoy it, being the town's monster?" Her tone was cutting. Garrett said nothing. He stared at his hands, calloused and trembling, and felt something stir deep within him. Anger. Not at her, but at Victor Clayton, the man who started all of this. As June stormed out of the room, Garrett sat in the dim light, his jaw set. For the first time in years, he felt a spark of resolve. Victor wasn't going to get away with it. The air on the farm grew heavier with each passing day. Garrett woke at dawn, as he always had, but now his movements carried a different weight, not just the strain of a failing farm, but of the unspoken tension under his roof. June had begun venturing outside more often. She still kept her distance, lingering near the edge of the fields or the old barn, her figure small against the sprawling land. Garrett watched from afar, unsure if he should approach. Every time he tried, the memory of her words, "I'm not your responsibility," echoed in his mind like a warning. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Garrett found her crouched near the fence line. At first, he thought she was simply sitting, but as he stepped closer, he saw the small creature trembling in her hands, a young coyote, its paw tangled in wire. June worked quietly, fingers nimble as she loosened the snare and whispered soft reassurances. "You shouldn't get that close," Garrett said gently, keeping his voice low so as not to startle her. June didn't look up. Someone has to help him. He's hurt because of us. Garrett paused, realizing this was the first time she'd spoken to him without venom. There was no accusation, only quiet determination. For a moment, he saw her differently, not as the girl he had unwillingly won, not as the wounded soul hiding behind cold eyes, but as someone braver than she realized. That night, he sat on the porch long after she'd gone back inside. The stars above seemed distant, cold, but within him, a fire had begun to smolder. For too long, he had let life beat him down, let others define him by his failures. Watching June tend to the wounded animal had reminded him of something he thought he'd lost, the will to fight. In town, whispers about Victor Clayton grew louder. Stories emerged about his cruelty, his control over people desperate for loans or work, his stepdaughter's life behind closed doors. Garrett listened, his anger sharpening with every word. He knew the system was stacked against him. Men like Victor didn't fall easily, but Garrett wasn't planning to play fair anymore. One morning, he stood at the edge of the fields as the wind stirred the dry grass. He made a silent vow, not just to himself, but to the girl who had been treated like a bargaining chip. If Victor Clayton thought he could destroy lives and walk away untouched, he was about to learn how wrong he was. The air on the farm felt lighter now, though neither Garrett nor June said much about it. She spent her mornings near the house, tending a small patch of wildflowers she had planted. Garrett watched from a distance, recognizing the quiet strength in her hands as she coaxed life from dry soil. In town, Victor Clayton's name was no longer spoken in hushed tones. The stories had come pouring out. Families ruined, neighbors silenced. Garrett's statement to the reporter had started it, but it was June's calm testimony that had shaken the community awake. When the verdict came, the news spread like wildfire. Victor would finally face justice. Garrett drove June back to the farm that evening in silence. The house no longer felt so heavy, though it still carried the ghosts of the past. As they stood by the porch, Garrett spoke softly. "You don't owe me anything. If you're ready to leave, I'll take you wherever you want." June looked at him, her eyes steadier now. "Maybe I'll stay, just for a while. This place doesn't feel so empty anymore." Garrett nodded, a quiet relief settling over him. For the first time in years, he let himself believe that even the barren earth could bloom again.